So welcome everyone to our final session. It's been a great conference, and I'm very pleased to introduce my friend and my senator, Senator Jon Tester. Jon is the senior senator from Montana, and he is the only farmer in the United States Senate, and he's thereby the only organic farmer in the United States Senate. Senator Tester operates an organic farm with his wife, Charla, on the same land near the town of Big Sandy, Montana, where his grandparents homesteaded in 1912. I would commend to you the senator's new book, Grounded, in which he writes eloquently, even poetically, about soil health. And if Senator Tester doesn't quote his own book in his remarks, I may conclude the conference with a couple lines from that book. Senator, we were joined earlier today by Senator John Boozman, and he commented that when it comes to farm programs, the debate often is not between Republicans and Democrats as much as it is between different regions of the country. Well, your farm's located way up in the headwaters of the Mississippi, and Senator Boozman's down near the down the bottom of the watershed. But I think that you may have a lot of things in common. He grew up raising beef when he was a kid in northwestern Montana, and you grew up on a farm as well. So very delighted to have you join us, and look forward to your remarks. So over to you.
Well, thanks, Steve. And just as a little pre-statement here, Jon Boozman is a good friend of mine. We work together on Veterans Affairs, and he's a good guy. But it's also fair to say that I'm not really a mainstream ag thinker, as most of you that know me know that. So it is great that it's great that I'm invited here to speak to you, and I just want to say thanks for that opportunity. And Steve Thompson, my longtime friend, thank you for everything you do and for that kind introduction, and for NCAT, thanks for putting on this conference, and congratulations on making it to your 45th year as a Montana-based national organization focused on things like sustainable ag and clean energy and resilient communities. All those, by the way, are very, very important for this nation as a whole, and in Montana specifically. Look, this is a great conference for people to get together and collaborate and develop synergy and come up with ideas that can make our soil healthier and thus more sustainable. There's nobody that's involved in agriculture that doesn't understand that soil health is really the foundation for our ability to raise a high quality product. It helps with everything from erosion to the ability to have good planting bed to be able to actually come right down and pass it on to the next generation of people that we're renting this planet from. As Steve pointed out, my wife and I have a unique opportunity. We were blessed in that are able to farm the land that my grandfather and grandmother homesteaded starting in 1910, patenting in 1915. Back in those days, nobody used chemicals because chemicals hadn't been developed yet. So they had to develop, crop rotations and things like that to deal with insects and disease and weed pressures. And everybody knows that that's as critical as it was when the land was broke from native sod. It's still critical today. Those crop rotations and times of planting are very important when it comes to pest control, but also when it comes to building the soil. And so what my grandfather knew 100 years later, we're trying to replicate. And in between those times came World War II, and we developed a chemical industry, and it's being used by the vast majority of farmers still today. In fact, I think we took the farm over in '78. I think chemical use has probably increased many, many times over since we took the farm over 43 years ago. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm saying oftentimes what happens with these chemicals is it reduces sustainability and increases input costs. And so it reduces sustainability both from a soil standpoint and from an income standpoint. But the thing it reduces more than anything, I will just tell you, is what happens when I plow down a field of peas for green manure. And that smell is, I don't know what the heck heaven's going to smell like, but if it smells like that field of peas that I plowed down for green manure, I'm gonna be plenty happy with that, because it's one of the best smells in the world. And how the soil smells is critically important as to the sustainability of that soil. I think it's very, very, very important. And my mother even would take it a step further. She would actually taste the soil. And I know some people look at it, is she crazy, eating dirt? I mean, she didn't take it up by the spoonful, trust me, but she would reach down in the soil and bring it up and smell it and taste it. And that was how she determined if things were right with that ground. And it's important we keep some of this stuff in mind, because the generations that came before us learned a lot, and we don't want to throw it away just because it's replaced by some tool that was developed in a lab. And speaking of that, we have other challenges out there that quite frankly, my grandparents never had. And my parents either, as far as that goes, even though it was well in progress by the time my folks took the farm over, and that is climate change. I got more stories to tell you about what's happened on our farm over the last 30 years or so from a climate change standpoint than you've got time to listen to. But I can tell you there's been more times than not in the wintertime, it's been warmer in Montana than it has in Washington, D.C. And last time I checked, Washington, D.C. was classified as a southern city. I can tell you there's been times in the last 20 years where a reservoir that my father dug in the late 1940s that had water in it immediately after he dug it because groundwater seeped in was bone damn dry for multiple years on end. I can tell you many stories that the runoff that we have on our land, and we've got a little coulee that runs behind our barn and chicken coop that ran so hard that I thought that chicken coop that was also built in the 1950s, we would lose it due to the water. So all those things have to do with climate change, along with things like sawflies, which were never around when I was a kid, but now is a horrible damn pest. And it's due, much like the bark beetle in our forests, due to the fact that our winters don't get cold enough and they don't stay cold enough for long enough. So we've got some challenges out there when it comes to climate change. And I think agriculture can be a big part of the solutions to those climate change challenges we have. And I think that is why ATTRA is so important to transfer information to areas in rural America that really need it. And so, you know, there's new ideas that come out that actually they're good ideas because they actually make money for the rancher, and they help, or the farmer, or rancher too, and they help with climate change. And so we need to continue to look for those opportunities to do the things that we need to do to attack climate change and get the information out to the people who are on the land. There's going to be a lot done, I believe, in this administration when it comes to climate change. Some are going to classify anything that's being done with climate change as being evil for various reasons, which I won't speculate upon. But in the end, I will say, I firmly believe this. If we don't invest money into research, and if we don't look for opportunities that are out there that people in the business of agriculture are doing and have had success with it, with sinking carbon into the soils, then I think we're not leaving our kids the kind of opportunity that our parents and grandparents left for us. And that's where NCAT comes in. That's where ATTRA comes in. That's why you are so important. And I would be telling you a fib if I didn't say I've used many of your manuals myself. I pride myself on having good ideas in agriculture, but I certainly don't have all of them. And I certainly, there's a day go by where I don't have the possibility of learning something better that will help my operation than I knew the day before. And ATTRA plays a big role in distributing that information and helping getting it out to the folks across the country. On a sidebar, I also want to say that I just want to thank you for the work that you've done with the Armed to Farm program. I think you've had 10 or 20 trainings. You've reached almost 1,000 veterans across the U.S. This is really important. It's important for a lot of reasons. We need more farmers anyway. But the fact is that production agriculture can also help with any issues that might revolve around mental health and so soil health isn't the only thing that's on the docket in this particular case. And so I applaud your effort to help our veterans as they come back and try to change from warriors to civilians. But look, I will end by saying thank you for the work that you do every day. Montana producers need you. Your ideas are critically important to family farm agriculture survival. The big guys are going to try to get over many acres as they can. They're going to use anything they can do to get over those acres. You're going to come up with ideas that are going to help family farmers survive, and you're going to distribute those ideas so the family farmers can. I dream of the day when we can repopulate rural America and not have it so you need 5,000 acres to make a living in agriculture. It's possible. And in fact, we have 1,800 acres, farm 1,600 of it, and we've supported 2 families on that land for most of that farm's life. But a lot of this goes to the distribution of ideas. A lot of it goes to coming up with ideas that don't continue to cost more money. I just got to say one thing, because we've seen the advent of no-till farming, and it's had some real positive impacts, quite frankly, particularly on wind erosion. One of the negative things that's happened, and I've just noticed this over the last 5 or 10 years, is that there's these big spots that are starting to appear. It kind of looks like saline seep, but it's not. And it's due to no-till, and it's due to use of some chemicals, I am told. I'm not judging. There's been research done on how to stop this. And it seems like every time we look to our land-grant universities for ideas on how to stop a problem, they suggest we go buy another input to stop that problem. And I will tell you that although maybe a solution to the problem, is not how we should be looking at production agriculture. More inputs aren't going to keep people on the land. We've got to come up with ideas and practices that we can implement that will help build the soil and help take care of some of these problems. And they're out there. We just need to have that in mind moving forward. Ag research really needs to be focused on production agriculture, family farms. I think it's focused way too much on agribusiness. And that's a whole nother time for debate. So I just want to thank you guys for opening your door up to me. Thank you for inviting me to speak. And now I'm going to turn it back to Steve, or whoever it might be, for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Senator. We do have some questions, and if you've got time, we'll send them your way and see how you want to deal with them. Predictably, questions coming in regarding policy. So I'll just go through a few of them. And as we look toward the next farm bill, how can the government do more through policy to support regenerative and organic farming instead of what seems to be the emphasis on GMO, commodity, industrial agriculture?
Great question. I will tell you that I think it all starts with research, and I really don't think that the organic industry is getting the dollars back that they're putting in to the economy, and I think that we need to put more money into organic ag research, which, by the way, will not only help organic agriculture, it'll help everybody. And I think it's really important. Here's the challenge you have in Washington, D.C. The challenge you have in Washington, D.C. is multinational agribusiness has some clout. And I will tell you that with clout comes, people don't want to make them mad. And I'm not cut of that cloth. I think that there are more important things in making agribusiness mad. Whether it's things like ag research, whether it's things like labeling of foods, which I've been a strong advocate for, whether it's country of origin labeling or labeling of GMOs. And I'm not making any judgment that GMOs may be bad for you, but I do think that people have a right to know what the hell they're eating. And to further that out, I mean, I started this back, I think it was back in 2001 in the state legislature. We had a labeling bill for genetically modified food, believe it or not, before it was that big of a deal. And there was a agribusiness person that caught me outside the hearing room and threatened me. Those were days where I was quite a bit thinner and in a lot better shape. And I told him we could go out and dance if that's what he wanted to do. But the bottom line is that agribusiness is not going to move away from things that make them money. So the federal government needs to support with ag research. And I think that's really the key, organic ag research. And like I said, it'll help everybody.
Thank you. Well, the next question gets into a particular program, a big part of the farm policy, which is crop insurance. Can you speak to how reforms to our crop insurance program can help us unlock funds to help farmers and ranchers transition to more regenerative land management philosophies?
Well, I think what has to happen is okay, so I raise alfalfa, okay? I got no crop insurance on alfalfa to speak of. It's worth a damn. I raise wheat. I've got pretty darn good insurance for wheat. I think we need to take a look at putting, and by the way, I would, and I think it's rightfully so, I would contribute a lot more carbon sink to an alfalfa than I would to a grain, okay? So you've got to look at the crop insurance program and encourage them to raise some of these crops that typically aren't being raised by traditional farmers, by making sure the crop insurance program will help them. I'm not for a crop insurance program that meets every dollar that they would have made on the standing crop, and I hope that never happens. But there needs to be a safety net there for crops that are outside the general spectrum for farmers to raise. And I think that's those regenerative crops. You guys know them better than I, as a matter of fact. But make sure that there's some safety net for those crops, not just wheat and corn and cotton and soy and that kind of stuff, but also some of the crops that are regenerative.
Great, thanks. Here's a question from up over the Continental Divide from where I am in Butte. Local watershed groups like the Big Hole Watershed Committee are eager to get incentives on the ground for watershed scale conservation. Can we lock in capacity funding for local watershed groups and conservation districts to deliver conservation through partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, on the ground collaboration is where that stuff happens, and that's big kudos to the folks. And I will tell you that I will continue to fight to make sure those dollars are there. You guys need to keep informing me where the best place to put those dollars are, where they'll do the most good, whether that's in local conservation districts or whether that's in collaborative groups or whatever it might be. But that's really the key to water, is on the ground collaboration.
So here's another question related to crop insurance and the theme of climate resilience, as we have more extreme weather events, whether it's drought or the type of heavy rainfall, flooding events that you described. So the question is, Senator Tester, do you favor having regenerative strings attached to farmers receiving crop insurance or commodity program assistance, i.e. requiring implementation of some practices supporting soil health and farm resilience?
So hopefully you wouldn't have to have strings, but I guess if they're necessary, they're necessary. I think that anytime you can regenerate your soil and make your soil healthier, that's money in the bank, literally money in the bank for farmers. And so hopefully, and farmers, I'm going to tell you that if you get your ag experiment stations to push out, this is what you need to be doing, that's what they do. And I can tell you that If strings are necessary, that's fine. I'm not big on strings, but I think it'd be much better to have, in my case, the Northern Ag Experiment Station say, you know what? If you put this crop within your rotation, it's going to improve your soil health, have some metrics around it that farmers can understand, and move on from there. I think that's, like I said, I'm not opposed to strings, although I don't like them much. On the other side of the coin, I think that if we're talking about soil health, and look, I get it. Sometimes you're not set up and you don't have the capacity financially to try anything different. But if that experiment station's already got that stuff tricked out, I think that farmers are more likely to jump on it.
Okay, we'll step away from policy for a second and talk terminology. There's been words used in the last couple of days. Regenerative has been probably the most heavily used word. Organic, definitely, which we have, a pretty specific set of standards that define organic. Sustainable is an old standby that a lot of us still use. Climate smart agriculture is another phrase. What do you think of the phrase regenerative, which is not clearly defined anyway? Is that a useful way of talking to the American people and maybe connecting farmers and consumers around some shared values?
Yeah, I think regenerative works. I mean, I guess it depends on who you talk to as to what it means. I always look at native sod, the organic matter that's in native sod, and the tilth of that soil as being where we need to be. There may be ways to get above that, by the way, which I'm not saying there aren't, but that's how I've looked at things. And so regenerative to me is take it back so you can get as close as you can to the days when my grandfather turned that first piece of native sod over. Soil building is another term that I use, and I think it means the same as regenerative in my vocabulary. But I think regenerative is a clear word that people can associate with. So I think it's good.
Yeah, I remember, it reminds me of a conversation that you and I had several years ago on this very topic. And I think I asked you, and I don't recall your answer, except I think you weren't sure. So we'll see if you went back and actually did your homework to answer this question. Like on your farm or the farms in your vicinity in north central Montana, what do you think the current soil carbon level is compared to those sod days before the sod busting? Do you have any sense of?
It's not where it could be. I think, and you guys can probably do some work and find out if I'm telling the truth on this, because I'm kind of shooting from the hip. But as I recall, organic matter, which is what I associate with carbon, was about 3.5% optimum. And I think most people are looking at, I don't think most people are at 2%, and some are less than 1%. But that's what makes that soil, and at least this is my belief, I'm not a scientist, but that's what makes that soil smell good when you roll it over. That's what makes that soil taste good. That's what lets you know that there's life in that soil, that there's organisms that are working. And so I think that's about where I'm at. I'm in a place that gets about 11 to 12 inches of rain a year. Topsoil's about 6 inches deep, and then it's got a clay base under it. So that's where I'm at. Sandy loam on top, clay base to the bottom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question that relates to that, going back to your farm. Senator Tester, are you considering getting carbon payments from the private sector for your good stewardship on 1,800 acres? What type of impact do you think carbon sequestration payments can have in moving American farmers toward more regenerative practices? So I guess it's a two-part question.
That's really, no, I mean, it's a great idea, and hopefully it would help move people to it. I mean, I think you'd have to change your cropping systems than what we're using. I mean, we are putting more pulse crops into our rotations now, unlike it was 30 years ago. Oil seeds, nothing like it was 30 years ago, but there's still a few oil seeds around. So we're getting some, hell, they're even talking about raising some hemp, I might even do that. Who knows? And by the way, if I do that, the main reason for that, because quite frankly, I'd raise the fiber, and I can make far more money raising something else than hemp fiber. But the bottom line is, I want to see what it's going to do to the soil from an organic standpoint as far as organic matter that's in the soil. So I have never thought about, and I don't even know if I'm eligible for it, any sort of money for carbon sink, but anything I can do to make the farm more sustainable financially, I'd be a fool not to look at it and move forward. But also keeping this in mind, what I said earlier, that anytime you're building soil, you're creating a cash value within your soil, and you're sinking carbon in and helping with climate change too. So you win both ways.
Mm-hmm. So seems to be a lot of talk right now in DC. There's a Senate bill that Debbie Stabenow and Mike Braun have introduced. I don't know if they've introduced it yet this session, but last year they did. The Biden administration's been talking about ways of supporting or facilitating private carbon markets, doing carbon banking. One of the concerns that's been talked about a little bit during this conference is that for someone like you that's been working on your soil carbon since going organic in 1986, you've been doing this for a few decades now, and any carbon market would be based on additionality, additional new practices. There's also concerns that people talk about how do you actually measure long-term soil carbon additions. There's questions about measurements on that. What are your thoughts on the role of the federal government in supporting or facilitating or aggregating carbon markets for soil health?
Well, I think it's something that we should probably be talking about. Although I will tell you that climate change is so existential that I think that if opportunities are given to farmers and it doesn't hurt them financially up front, and they can do this, there's no reason why they shouldn't just do it, because climate change is that big of a problem. So I don't know that you need that carrot that the federal government could hold out in front. On the other side, when you have agribusiness that is pushing out a message that all you got to do is spray, plant, and harvest, and put a little fertilizer on it in between, it's hard to go against that, because it's pretty damn simple, quite frankly. And if you're going to do some soil building, you got to do things differently, and it's a little more complicated. And most people aren't going to change unless you give them the money. So I've talked myself right back into the circle where it says that there's probably merit to it.
Okay. Well, you're not on the Ag Committee. You're on the Ag Appropriations Committee, so you've got a hand in it, but you won't be writing the next farm bill. But I have a feeling that there will be other senators asking your opinion because you know what you're talking about.
Well, I will just tell you that, and I think that markets are really, really important, and I think we need to export. We need to do all that stuff. And from a multinational agribusiness standpoint, that's cool. But I'm telling you, we need research for people in production ag that helps people in production ag. We need research that helps farmers. Not that costs a bunch more money to fix a problem, but helps farmers either solve the problem before it starts or be able to solve the problem without pumping a bunch of money in. I'm going to tell you the amount of money that goes into inputs that are not a lot of competition in that market either. And then you raise something and you go back out is one of the reasons that I converted to organics in 1986. I was 28 years old. No, I wasn't. I was 30 years old. I'm lying. 30 years old. Don't make me sound younger than I am. And I remember driving my 54 GMC into town, hauling weed into town, hating farming, thinking, how are these guys going to screw me on this stuff this time? How are they going to find something wrong with it? They can dock me on the price and dock me there. And then you know, if you combine that with the fact that we were sick, combine that with the fact that my wife got sick from the seed tree, I got sick from the spray, we did everything wrong, but the truth is it still made us sick. The conversion was something we had to do. And then if you take and say, all right, so now instead of raising wheat and barley, I shouldn't say that, instead of raising winter wheat and a little bit of barley, we started raising things like red lentils and buckwheat and all sorts of different kinds of grains, and started putting 1/10 of my land into alfalfa and leaving it there for 3 to 5 years, and then breaking that out and putting another 160 into alfalfa. I mean, it just made agriculture so damn much more fun. And that's the truth. If you got a job you hate, you're not going to do a very good job at it. If you got a job you love, you're going to be continually looking for new ways to make this job even more fun. And I think climate change, even though it's a hell of a problem, it could make agriculture even more fun. I mean, you could do some things to help build your soil and help the climate become more stable. And I think that's just really, really appealing to me. And by the way, not to go back to where we started, but that's where ATTRA comes in, because you guys are looked at as somebody that's trusted in the agricultural community. At least I sure see you that way. And for you guys to distribute information out to the people in production agriculture it's a win-win for everybody.
It sounds like a great place to leave it right there. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna take a couple minutes and wrap things up because you're our final session. You're welcome to stay with us. I like the way you ended it because this conference has been fun, and it's been fun because there's been this sense of hope. We all know what the problems are. We all know what the challenges are. But there's been, people have been fired up. There's been great chats. There's been great discussions on the panels. And, Wendell Berry talks about the distinction between optimism and hope. And, Wendell Berry, the great agrarian, philosopher, and farmer from Kentucky, he's not very optimistic. He'll be pretty honest with you about it. He's not full of optimism about the future, but yet he's full of hope. And he distinguishes between the two. And hope is in the things that we can do on the ground in our daily activities, the people that we spend our time with. And that's fun, right? So I'm going to look at my final comments here. I got a little bit of housekeeping.
I just got one thing,
please.
Thompson. I want to know the quote from my book. God dang it, I've been waiting. How long I've been talking?
Well, you pretty much said it. You just weren't reading it here.
Okay.
But it really ties into that. And I think it's been a long conference, so I'm not going to go into review of the key themes, other than to say, innovative technology, a real focus on field machinery. We've heard from farmers, large and small, that are just trying new things out in the fields. A lot of trial and error and trying again. And so maybe the most innovative technology that we experienced in the last couple of days is farmers that are willing to share with others their trial and error. And that's a technique. A technique is a technology. We heard a lot about networking between producers through peer-to-peer learning systems, between farmers, researchers, and agencies, between food growers and food eaters. There's a lot of talk about connections between fungi and bacteria and microbes in the soil, connections between public policy and emerging markets for carbon or ecosystem services, and food and fiber companies that are trying to meet that and connect with consumers and meet that demand. A lot of talk about connections between the way we manage the soil and the quality of food that nourish our bodies. But ultimately, I think the main theme is this sense of hope. And so I just wanted to conclude to bring it back to your book. And NCAT does not get any kickback on sales of the book, but I do recommend it. I've read it and enjoyed it. But finally, there's a lot of discussion about how do we measure success. And I wanted to highlight two of the things that I picked up. And one of them was in our last panel, Montana rancher Cooper Hibbard wants to be able to look back and and at the end of his life, and know that he left things in better shape than when he started. And you know, the practices, and you probably experienced this as well, Senator, out in the field. Sometimes if you're not doing the same thing that others in your neighborhood are doing, that can be a little uncomfortable. But Cooper said the desire of doing right by the ground outweighed the fear of being ostracized by the community. And then Jon Tester, from his book Grounded, before the family farm went conventional with chemical use, and before it went organic again, back when you were growing up, Senator, this is the quote from your book. Mother knew that soil was good because she scooped it up in her hands, held it to her lips, breathed it in, and tasted it. If it tasted sweet, earthy, funky, and mysterious, she would say it's healthy enough to grow food. Yes, she would say, this is good stuff. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And that's the conclusion of the Soil Health Innovations Conference. And I think we're probably going to do this next year. So we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.